Welcome back to Gen X Gon Give It To Ya, where we celebrate the movies, music, television shows, and unforgettable moments that shaped our generation. I'm your host, Deshanta, and today we're going to head back to the place filled with leather jackets, poodle skirts, hot rods, high school romance, and some of the most iconic songs ever recorded. Today we're talking about Grease. Now, I don't know about you, but growing up, it seemed like Grease was always on television. Every time it aired, people watched. It didn't matter if you've seen it 10 times or you've seen it 100 times. You sat down and watched it again. We sang along, we quoted the lines, we argued about whether you were a pink lady or a T-bird. And let's be honest, most of us knew every word to Summer Nights long before we understood half of what the lyrics were actually talking about. Nearly 50 years after its release, Grease remains one of the most beloved movie musicals ever made. But how did a movie about teenagers in the 1950s become such a massive part of Generation X culture? We'll explore the history of the movie, the cast, the characters, the music, and the fascinating story behind Hollywood's most successful musicals. Class is now in session at Rydell High. Before Grease became a movie phenomenon, it was actually a stage musical. The original version premiered in Chicago in 1971 before making its way to Broadway the following year. Interestingly, the original stage production was quite different from the version most of us know today. The stage show was rougher, edgier, a little more realistic. It was inspired by working-class youth culture of the 1950s. The creators wanted to capture the language, attitudes, and the experiences of actual teenagers from that era. What they created struck a nerve. Audiences loved it. The show became a hit. By the mid-1970s, Hollywood was paying attention. Now remember, America was already experiencing a wave of nostalgia for the 1950s. Television audiences were flocking to see Happy Days. Classic rock and roll music was experiencing a resurgence. People seemed fascinated by what they perceived as a simpler time. Hollywood realized that Grease had the potential to become something special. The challenge would be finding the right cast. And that brings us to one of the most important decisions in movie musical history, John Travolta. At the time, Travolta was becoming one of the biggest stars in the world. He had already gained attention on television, and then came Saturday Night Fever. Suddenly, he was everywhere. He had charisma, he could dance, he could sing, he had movie star looks. For many people, he was the obvious choice to play Danny Zuko, but finding Sandy proved more difficult. Producers needed someone who could sing beautifully while also possessing a natural innocence and charm. One name kept coming up, Olivia Newton-John. At the time, Newton-John was already a successful recording artist with multiple hit songs, but she wasn't convinced she was right for the role. She worried that she was too old to play a high school student. She requested a screen test with Travolta before agreeing to sign on. Fortunately, the chemistry between them was immediate. When producers saw them together, they knew they had found their stars. Looking back today, it's almost impossible to imagine anyone else in those roles. Their chemistry became one of the key reasons the movie worked so well. But they weren't the only memorable members of the cast. Let's meet some of the students at Rydell High. First, we have Danny Zuko, played by John Travolta. Danny is the leader of the T-Birds. He's confident, popular, cool. At least that's the image he projects. Beneath the leather jacket and swagger is someone who genuinely wants to be loved and accepted. He's constantly torn between who he really is and who he thinks he's supposed to be. Then we have Sandy Olsen, played by Olivia Newton-John. Sandy is sweet, polite, optimistic. She's the newcomer, the outsider, the girl who suddenly finds herself in an environment very different from anything she's known before. Throughout the film, Sandy struggles to determine how much of herself she should change in order to fit in. Their relationship becomes the heart of the movie. But Grease is much more than a story about Danny and Sandy. The supporting characters are truly what brings Rydell High to life. Let's start with the Pink Ladies. The Pink Ladies are the school's most recognizable female clique. Leading the group is Betty Rizzo, played by Stockard Channing. Rizzo is sarcastic, tough, and fiercely independent. She says exactly what's on her mind. She doesn't sugarcoat anything, and she certainly doesn't care about what people think, or at least that's what she wants everyone to believe. As the story unfolds, we discover that Rizzo may actually be one of the most vulnerable characters in the entire film. Next, we have Frenchie, played by Didi Khan. Frenchie is lovable, optimistic, and always dreaming about the future. She's not the strongest student academically, but she has a huge heart. Many viewers relate to Frenchie because she represents anyone who's ever felt unsure about their place in the world. Then we have Marty, played by Dinah Manoff. Marty loves attention. She enjoys flirting. She has a collection of letters from military pen pals and dreams of a glamorous future. And finally, Jan, played by Jamie Donnelly. Jan is hilarious. She's quirky. She's obsessed with food. And she provides some of the funniest moments in the entire movie. Together, these four girls create one of the most memorable friendship groups in film history. Now let's meet the T-Birds. Danny's closest friend is Kenickie, played by Jeff Conaway. Kenickie is loud, confident, and perhaps even rougher around the edges than Danny. His prized possession is a beat-up car that eventually becomes one of the movie's most famous symbols. Then we have Duty, played by Barry Pearl. Duty is youthful and goofy. He's the kind of friend who always trying to make people laugh. Sonny is the wisecracker of the group. Sonny is played by Michael Tucci. He's constantly making jokes and attempting to impress girls. And finally, Putsy, played by Kelly Ward. Putsy is the quiet one, the laid-back member of the gang who often gets overlooked but adds balance to the group's dynamic. Together, the T-Birds represent the classic greaser image that becomes synonymous with 1950s youth culture. Of course, no high school would be complete without a few authority figures. Rydell High is overseen by Principal McGee, played by Eve Arden, who spends much of her time attempting to maintain order among a student body that seems determined to create chaos. Then there's Coach Calhoun, played by Sid Caesar, whose attempts to guide students often led to comedic results. Shout out to supporting characters Eugene, played by Eddie Deason, Patty Simcox, played by Susan Buckner, and Tom, played by Lorenzo Lamas. And let's not forget Vince Fontaine, played by Ed Burns, the smooth-talking dance show host who becomes involved in one of the movie's most memorable sequences. By the time we meet all these characters, the stage is set. The friendships are established, the social groups are defined, and a summer romance is about to collide with the realities of high school life. What happens next is one of the most famous openings in movie history. Danny and Sandy meet during summer vacation. The setting is simple: a beach, sunshine, ocean waves, young love. The two quickly form a connection. They spend the summer together, walking along the beach, sharing stories, falling in love. For Sandy, it feels magical. For Danny, it feels magical too. But there's one problem. They believe their time together is coming to an end. As summer draws to a close, Sandy prepares to return to Australia with her family. Neither believes they'll ever see each other again. Their goodbye is emotional, heartfelt, and surprisingly sincere. At that moment, they have no idea that fate has other plans. Because when Danny and Sandy unexpectedly reunite at Rydell High, everything changes. Their romance is put to the test. Friendships are challenged, hearts get broken, and some of the greatest songs in movie history are about to begin. When Sandy arrives at Rydell High, she quickly learns that high school has its own social structure. Frenchie takes Sandy under her wing and introduces her to the Pink Ladies. Sandy is nervous. Everything feels unfamiliar. She's trying to fit in while still being herself. Meanwhile, Danny has returned to his normal life with the T-Birds. He's once again the cool guy, the leader, the one everyone looks up to. Then comes one of the most famous songs in movie history, Summer Nights. The boys gather together, the girls gather together, and each group begins telling their version of Danny and Sandy's summer romance. Sandy's version is sweet, romantic, innocent. Danny's version is exaggerated and boastful. He's trying to impress his friends. He's performing an image. And just when both groups have built up the mystery, Danny and Sandy are unexpectedly reunited at the drive-in. Sandy is thrilled. Sandy is expecting the same loving boy she met at the beach. But Danny suddenly becomes someone else. In front of his friends, he acts distant, cocky, unimpressed. You can almost feel Sandy's heartbreak. Danny is standing there being a dumbass. You know how it is, baby. Rocking and rolling and whatnot. Sandy leaves humiliated. Danny immediately regrets what he's done. But the damage has already been done. As school progresses, Sandy attempts to adjust to life at Rydell. Frenchie tries to help her fit in. The Pink Ladies welcome her into their social circle. Well, most of them. Rizzo in particular takes great pleasure in teasing Sandy. Rizzo views Sandy as too perfect, too innocent, too wholesome. At a slumber party, Rizzo delivers one of the film's most memorable musical numbers, Look at Me, I'm Sandra Dee. The song is playful, sarcastic, and funny. but beneath the humor is something deeper. Rizzo resents the way society judges girls. She understands that people see Sandy as the ideal young woman while viewing someone like her very differently. It's one of the earliest hints that Rizzo is much more complicated than she first appears. Meanwhile, Danny is trying desperately to repair his relationship with Sandy. When they're alone together, he's sincere, he's apologetic, he's affectionate. The problem is that every time his friends appear, he slips back into Mr. Tough Guy. Sandy begins to wonder which version of Danny is real, as she should. While she's on a date with Tom, played by Lorenzo Lamas, at the Frosty Palace, Danny eventually convinces Sandy to give him another chance. One of the biggest events of the school year arrives when Rydell hosts a televised dance competition. The host is the smooth-talking Vince Fontaine. This sequence captures everything people love about Grease. The music, the dancing, the fashion, the energy. Danny and Sandy attend together. For a brief moment, it looks like their relationship finally gets back on track. Then chaos arrives in the form of Cha-Cha Di Gregoria. Cha-Cha is a talented dancer and Danny's former flame. When the dance competition begins, she cuts in with the help of Sonny, which was weird. Some say he was wasted and didn't know what he was doing. Anyway, Danny gets swept into the competition. Before long, he and Cha-Cha are dancing together. They win the contest, but Sandy only sees one thing: Danny choosing someone else, again. Heartbroken, she leaves. It's another setback in a relationship already hanging by a thread. At the same time, another important storyline is developing. Frenchie decides to leave high school and enroll in beauty school. Unfortunately, things don't go as planned. She struggles academically. She begins to doubt herself. She feels like a failure. Then comes one of the most random and most entertaining moments in the entire movie. Frenchie dreams she's visited by a heavenly figure played by teen idol Frankie Avalon. Surrounded by glowing lights and angelic imagery, he warns her not to give up on education. The sequence is funny, colorful, completely over the top, and obviously unforgettable. Ultimately, Frenchie realizes she needs to rethink her plans. It's a reminder that life doesn't always follow a straight path. It's here I want to share my Frankie Avalon story. I was working at this cafe that was very close to Proctor's Theater, so we would frequently serve many patrons and cast members from traveling Broadway shows. One particular day, in walks Frankie Avalon. I treated him as if I would anyone else. I never let on the fact that I recognized him until he was about to leave. As he's walking out, I say, "Hey, Mr. Avalon." He turns around and I continued, "Break a leg," because I knew he was heading for a show. He looked at me and said something like, "Thanks, sweetie." He was performing as part of Dick Fox's Golden Boys with Fabian and Lou Christie. Now back to the movie. Danny is upset and decides that if being a greaser isn't winning Sandy back, maybe it's time for a change. He begins trying out different school activities: sports, track, basketball, wrestling. Watching Danny's attempt to reinvent himself provides some of the movie's funniest moments. The audience quickly realizes that Danny isn't naturally suited for these activities. For perhaps the first time, Danny is making an effort to become a better version of himself rather than simply maintaining an image. And Sandy notices. She sees the effort, even if she isn't quite ready to trust him again. Sandy finds herself alone with her thoughts. She knows Danny has hurt her. She knows he continues to disappoint her. Yet she can't stop loving him. This emotional conflict leads to Hopelessly Devoted to You. Olivia Newton-John's performance here is extraordinary. The song reveals Sandy's vulnerability, her confusion, her longing. It's one of the reasons audiences connected so deeply with her character. Many people have experienced loving someone who continually lets them down. That emotional truth gives the song lasting power. Decades later, it remains one of the most beloved songs from the soundtrack. Now let's talk about Kenickie and perhaps the most famous automobile in movie musical history, Grease Lightning. Kenickie acquires an old car and dreams of transforming it into something spectacular. For the T-Birds, the car represents freedom, status, confidence, and teenage dreams. The musical number Grease Lightning explodes with energy. The choreography is electric. The enthusiasm is contagious. And the song quickly becomes one of the movie's signature moments. Even people who have never watched Grease often recognize the title. That's how deeply it penetrated popular culture. But while Danny and Sandy struggle with romance and Kenickie focuses on cars, Rizzo faces a much more serious challenge. She begins to fear she may be pregnant. Suddenly, the confident and sarcastic pink lady we've come to know appears frightened, vulnerable, and alone. Rumors begin spreading through classmates at the drive-in thanks to Big Mouth Marty. Judgment follows, and Rizzo finds herself confronting questions about reputation, responsibility, and self-worth. This storyline was surprisingly mature for a movie often remembered as light-hearted fun. It gave Grease emotional depth. It also allowed Stockard Channing to deliver one of the film's most powerful performances. In There Are Worse Things I Can Do, Rizzo drops her defenses. For the first time, we see the real person underneath the tough exterior. It's a beautiful moment, a heartbreaking moment, and one of the strongest scenes in the entire film. Eventually, Rizzo learns that she isn't pregnant. The relief is enormous, not only for her, but for Kenickie as well. And with that burden lifted, both characters can finally begin moving forward. As graduation approaches, tensions begin building toward one final confrontation. And it won't happen in a classroom or at a dance. It will happen on the streets, or more specifically, a race at Thunder Road against rival gang the Scorpions. Fast cars, teenage bravado, and a crowd eager to witness the showdown. Kenickie plans to represent the T-Birds in the race. After all, Grease Lightning is his pride and joy. Just before the race begins, disaster strikes. Kenickie injures himself and is unable to drive. Suddenly, all eyes turn to Danny. Without hesitation, Danny climbs behind the wheel. The race begins, the engines roar, the cars tear down the concrete channel. For a few intense moments, Danny finds himself locked in a dangerous contest of speed and nerve. And when Danny ultimately wins the race, he reestablishes himself as the leader of the T-Birds. But more importantly, he's beginning to gain confidence in who he really is. Not who his friends expect him to be. Not who society expects him to be. Simply himself. As the school year comes to a close, graduation approaches. The students of Rydell High prepare for one final celebration, a school carnival. It's colorful, joyful, and serves as the backdrop for one of the most famous finales in movie history. Before the carnival begins, Danny makes one final effort to become the kind of person he believes Sandy wants. He appears wearing a Letterman sweater, his hair is different, his attitude is different. He's trying to demonstrate he's matured. He's trying to show Sandy that he's serious. What Danny doesn't know is that Sandy has been going through a transformation of her own. And when she finally arrives at the carnival, the audiences get one of the most iconic reveals in cinematic history. Throughout the film, Sandy has been portrayed as sweet, modest, and conservative. But now she appears dressed in black. Black jacket, black pants, high heels, curled hair, confidence radiating from every step. The reaction from the other characters mirrors the reaction many audience members had in 1978. Shock, surprise, excitement. Danny is stunned. The Pink Ladies are stunned. The T-Birds are stunned. And suddenly, all the uncertainty that has existed between Danny and Sandy disappears. The transformation launches one of the greatest musical finales ever filmed. You're the One That I Want. It's energetic, playful, romantic, and completely irresistible. Even people who have never seen Grease can usually recognize this song within the first few seconds. The chemistry between John Travolta and Olivia Newton-John shines throughout the performance. The two dance, sing, laugh, and finally reconnect. For many viewers, this moment feels like the payoff to everything that came before. The celebration continues with another beloved number, We Go Together. The entire cast joins the performance. Students dance throughout the carnival grounds. Friends reunite. Couples come together. The school year ends on a joyful note. And then comes perhaps the strongest image in the entire movie. Danny and Sandy climb into a car. The car begins moving. Then, as if we're suddenly inside a fantasy, it lifts into the sky. And just like that, Grease comes to an end. It's whimsical, it's ridiculous, and somehow it works perfectly. Of course, Grease wouldn't become a cultural phenomenon without one critical ingredient, the music. Let's talk about the soundtrack. The Grease soundtrack became one of the best-selling soundtrack albums in history. In fact, it generated multiple hit singles and dominated radio stations around the world. The track Grease, performed by Frankie Valli, immediately established the film's identity. Interestingly, the song sounds much more like the late 70s than the 1950s, and that's part of its charm. It bridges two eras. Then there's Summer Nights. If you've ever attended a wedding, karaoke night, school event, or retro-themed party, chances are you've heard it. It's one of the most recognizable duets ever recorded. The playful back-and-forth storytelling remains endlessly entertaining. Hopelessly Devoted to You showcased Olivia Newton-John's incredible vocal talent. The song earned an Academy Award nomination and became one of her signature recordings. Grease Lightning remains pure fun. Fast, loud, energetic, a perfect representation of youthful confidence. Beauty School Dropout gave audiences one of the movie's most surreal moments. And then, of course, You're the One That I Want, the song became an international sensation. Decades later, it remains one of the best-selling duets in music history. That's remarkable staying power. Now let's talk about some fascinating behind-the-scenes facts. One of the funniest aspects of Grease is the age of the cast. Most of the actors were significantly older than their characters. Stockard Channing, who played Rizzo, was 33 years old. Several cast members were in their late 20s. Here's another famous story. Those skin-tight black pants worn by Olivia Newton-John in the finale, they were so tight that they reportedly had to be sewn onto her. Imagine filming an entire musical number under those conditions. The cast also developed strong friendships during filming. Many have spoken over the years about the fun atmosphere on set and the close bond that formed among the actors. Let's shift our focus to something bigger, the impact of Grease on popular culture. Few movies have had this kind of influence. Grease helped revive interest in 1950s fashion. Leather jackets became cool again. Pink lady jackets became iconic. Retro diners gained popularity. And suddenly, an entire generation became fascinated with sock hops, hot rods, and rock and roll culture. The movie also helped prove that musicals could still thrive at the box office. At a time when many believed movie musicals were fading away, Grease became a massive success. Its influence can be seen in countless productions that followed. From stage revivals to television tributes, Grease has remained a constant presence in entertainment. Schools continue to perform the musical. New generations continue to discover the film, and the songs continue to find new audiences. As the years passed, the cast members followed very different paths. John Travolta became one of Hollywood's biggest stars. Olivia Newton-John continued building an extraordinary music career while becoming beloved by fans around the world. Stockard Channing established herself as one of the most respected actresses of her generation. Others continue acting in television, film, and theater. Sadly, we lost members of the Grease family over the years. Rest in peace, Eve Arden, Sid Caesar, Jeff Conaway, Susan Buckner, and Olivia Newton-John. But their work continues to bring joy to millions of people. And perhaps that's one of the greatest legacies an artist can leave behind. So why does Grease still matter? Why does a movie released in 1978 continue attracting audiences in 2026? The answer is simple. Beneath the music, the dancing, and the nostalgia lies something universal. The desire to belong, the fear of rejection, the challenge of figuring out who you are, the hope that someone will love you for your authentic self. Those themes never go out of style. Every generation experiences them, every generation understands them, and that's why Grease continues to endure. We've explored the history, the characters, the music, the cultural impact, and the lasting legacy of one of the most beloved movie musicals ever made. Now I'd love to hear from you. What was your favorite song? Who was your favorite character? Were you Team Danny, Team Sandy, Team Rizzo, or maybe you always had a soft spot for Frenchie? Share your memories, share your stories, because that's what nostalgia is all about. Keeping those moments alive and passing them on to the next generation. And as much as many of us love Grease, it's worth mentioning that the music and culture that inspired the film didn't emerge in a vacuum. Rock and roll was built on the talents of Black artists like Little Richard, Chuck Berry, Fats Domino, Ray Charles. And while Grease presented an idealized and mostly white version of the 1950s, many fans of color embraced the movie anyway, making it part of their own memories and traditions. Like many classics, Grease can be both deeply loved and thoughtfully examined at the same time. On the next episode of Gen X Gon' Give It To Ya, I spotlight a singing legend whom we've lost recently. When I heard the news, I knew I wanted to give the man that made romance monumental his flowers. R&B crooner Peabo Bryson blessed us with many hits like Show and Tell, the duet with Regina Belle, A Whole New World, Aladdin's Theme, and If I Ever Had You in My Arms Again, and many more. I know Peabo is in a better place, yet being human, The loss really hit home when I listened to Tonight I Celebrate My Love, his duet with Roberta Flack. The man truly had a remarkable voice. Thanks again for tuning in to another episode of Gen X Gon' Give It To You. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell your friends. And by the way, I also want to update everyone that I'm trying out some new analytics, so the show will move to Tuesdays for now. Later.